Hello and welcome to the channel. And for today's video, we are going to do something a little bit different. Again, well, I mean, from what we've been doing lately, a tips and tricks video. So we're coming back to the subject of thinning paint, right? What should you paint your thin? Paint your thin. How much should you thin your paints for your projects? In our case, us customizers that we customize action figures, right? So how much do we need to thin our paint for our custom action figures and all of that? So there is no magic formula, right? Because different paints use different mediums and quality of pigmentation and quantity of pigmentation. Therefore, when you are reducing or thinning the paint, it all depends on how it's going to break down, depending on how much thinner you are applying to your paint. So I've got four separate type of paints here. We've got your standard craft paint that you can find in your Hobby Lobbies and your Michaels or your local craft store, that you can find very cheaply in large bottles. This is a 2-ounce bottle. You have your brand name paints. Well, maybe this one not, but we'll talk about this in just a second. You have your brand, and then you have your brand name paints. Now, I started to buy brand name paints to get an idea for how much I should thin my craft paint, because all of these are already set to go out of the bottle depending on what their application is going to be. So these model paints, Tamiya, Vallejo, the Mecha color line, and this Mexican brand called Ronin, which is a similar to Vallejo, according to them, and it is a good paint. So we have these, and then we have these two, the Createx and the Homie Art. These two are airbrush ready paints out of the bottle. So their consistency is going to be different from these and from this. And then here we have an ink bottle, which consistency is going to be different from this and this and this. So the idea is I'm going to show a demo. I'm going to put a drop of paint on this white cardboard cardstock, and I'm going to let it run so that you can see how much these paints truly are, hold their paint, and then you can see the consistency for each, so that you can get an idea for how much you need to thin down your paint depending on your application. So if you're going to brush on your paints, the model paints are already ready straight out of the bottle. If you're going to airbrush your paints, you're gonna need to thin these and definitely this to the consistency of these. So this Homie Art paint is something I found on not on eBay, on Amazon. I haven't airbrushed it yet. I haven't really tried it actually on my projects. I sometimes, I even forget that I have a whole box of, how much, I think like 24 colors that I bought it, that comes with the box. But anyway, there's that. And then of course you have your ink, which sometimes I use ink to thin down craft paint. Because if we're going to thin down craft paint with water, the quality of the pigmentation is going to break down if you just use water. So sometimes I like to use ink to add some of that pigmentation back. And because ink is very thin, it is basically water with color. It's thinning the craft paint and also adding in pigmentation to the color. So since this is just a test, I don't have a straight up blue. This is called flat low blue. This is just your basic blue. So when we're gonna do our test, I'm going to thin down the craft paint with the ink, so that you can see how that marriage, the result, you're gonna see the result of that marriage. We're going to start off with the craft paint. This is Craft Smart. I'm just gonna, if you can hear it, it's kind of liquidy, but it's also really thick. I'm pretty sure I haven't pre-thinned this paint. I've pre-thinned a bunch of my craft paints already because I have multiple bottles of each color almost, but I don't think I have another bottle of this blue. So I'm pretty sure this color has not been pre-thinned. I did run it through a mesh to remove some of the dried paint and clumps that accumulate on your craft paint. So it's pretty much all paint consistency here, and you're not gonna see. That's something that you wanna avoid with your paint, especially your craft paints. Excuse me. You wanna avoid like clumps and all of that. And you're going to see that when I apply this paint, it's gonna be running pretty much throughout the entire video, and it's not gonna be super low in terms of how much it's going to run. Just removing some of the dried paint from the cap here. I've already messed up my fingers. So I'm going to apply the paint straight out of the bottle onto the cardstock, and we're going to see how much it's going to travel. Sorry, there's the drop of paint right there. It's not moving at all. It's sticking there, hardly running at all. So that's when you buy your craft paint, that's basically all of the craft paints that you buy. Now again, the good thing is with craft paint, you're going to get almost 3 times as much quantity, you know, from this bottle than what you already have. So in terms of this bottle, which is 2 fluid ounces, if you thin that, you're gonna get probably 3 times as much paint. But you're going to need to thin it probably 2 parts thinner and 1 part paint to begin with. Again, it all depends on the different types of paint. Some craft paints are actually thinner than others. So again, it just depends. You have to watch the consistency, and then you're gonna have to look at it to get an idea how much you need to thin it out. Now we're going to try the Vallejo. This is the Mecha Color Electric Blue. And you can hear, you can see that, you can hear the difference. This is a lot. This is already a lot thinner. That's just a bubble, actually. Hold on. Yeah, that wasn't paint. So let's try it again. Not as planned. I think this is clogged up. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, yes, the paint was definitely clogged up at the tip, so I had to clean it up just a little bit. Hopefully this will work now. Let's see. There you go. So you can see that the paint is holding up the consistency throughout. Let me get a better shot. Okay, so you can see there the consistency of the paint as it's coming down. It hasn't lost any color of its color of the pigmentation as it's running down. You hardly see any white coming through, and you can see our glob of craft paint is still stuck in its drop, right? So now we are going to apply the Ronin paint, and you can hear that it's also very runny paint. Let me shake it real good here. So this paint should perform about as good as the Vallejo. Let's see. Oops. It's a heavier glob of paint for sure. The tip isn't as pointy as the. It's a little flatter, so I had a little trouble getting it. But you can see, again, the consistency of the paint throughout as it comes down the cardstock. It flows really well, and it maintains its pigmentation throughout, right? So it's a very you can probably the Vallejo and the Ronin paints you can probably use on an airbrush without the need to thin, but it is recommended by both brands to thin for airbrush. And now the Tamiya paint. Okay, so we're using all blue just to stay even here on the with the test, and use all blues. I have to use for the Tamiya. I have to use my little homemade stir that I created out of a piece of wire coat hanger that I flattened out a bottom of to make a flat end for stirring paints. Now the other thing is to remember, craft paint, Vallejo, and the Ronin paints are water based. The Tamiya is solvent based, even though it says it's acrylic. And there you can see the consistency of the Tamiya paint. Which is flowing, but it's not running down as fast as the Vallejo or the Ronin paint. But it is flowing. It's retaining its pigmentation throughout. You can see it's almost going to match the flow of the Vallejo paint. And then now we're on to the Createx airbrush color. This should also run pretty quick, pretty fast down the cardstock. And by the way, this side of the cardstock is a little slicker, so the paint should have run really, really fast down the down. You know, it should have flowed down fast. But the finish on this is a little glossy, so it should have run quicker. So now let's try the Createx, which again is airbrush ready out of the bottle. Well, what do you know? The glob of paint, the drop of paint, which I thought was almost as thick as the one that I used for the Ronin paint, is actually not running or flowing as much as I thought it would in comparison, seeing as how it's, you know, airbrush ready to flow. According to the bottle, it's ready straight out of the bottle. So that's a surprise. So next we're gonna try this new paint here that like I said, I got out of Amazon, Homey Art. Again, if you hear it. And by the way, the cardboard is sitting straight up, on a straight vertical. There is no curve, there is no slant. It's straight up. You know, I got it straight up. There's no manipulating this except gravity. Now let's see how this one flows. Maybe a little too much, but when I say too much, it means that if I'm trying to gauge this test fairly, I want the paints to be, the drop of paint to be the same across the board. So meaning I don't want one drop of paint to be heavier than the other in terms of because if it's a heavier drop of paint, it's probably gonna flow faster because of the weight behind it, right? But regardless, it's still looking. I pretty much applied the same drop, the consistency of the drop of paint from the Ronin and the Createx and the Homey Art. They're basically the same consistency in terms of the quality, the size of the drop of paint that I used. And you can see still up there on the left, the drop of craft paint is still sticking up there without much progress. And now we're going to test the ink, the blue ink, which, well, I mean, I've already been proven wrong once as far as the Createx paint and its flow. So hopefully that one is going to flow immediately down. This is basically water, you know, so it should flow down without much trouble. So yeah, very surprising results if you ask me. I haven't even done a pre-test of this. I just assumed that certain paints would flow better than others. You can see now that the ink is already going past the what is it, the Homey Art paint, and it's definitely surpassed the what is it, the Createx, this one. So what I'm surprised here is that the Createx is behaving more like the Vallejo while the Ronin paint is behaving more like the ink in terms of how quick it flowed. But even then, the ink, its flow is a little more slower. So yeah, that's quite interesting how the results came out. I was truly not expecting, I was definitely expecting more like it progressing like this. The only result that I'm not surprised about is the craft art, the craft smart paint. That definitely is super thick and it needs thinning down. So what I'm going to do is pause. I'm going to mix a 50-50 combination of the craft smart craft paint and thin it down with distilled water. That's what I use to thin down when I'm using water. I don't use straight up water from the faucet. I don't know what it is about the properties of distilled water versus regular water. All I know is that distilled water has less crap in it, like instead of your run-of-the-mill faucet water. Well, you can use other types of water. You know, if you don't want to use distilled water, you can probably use bottled water and all of that. So you can hear me mixing up the paint here. So this mix right here, let me zoom out because it's a little too extreme. There you go. This is very watery. I'll probably use a little too much. But you can see how much, you can see right there. Let's see how much this, ooh, that's nasty. Now let's see how much this paint flows. There's a drop right there. It's flowing, right? But you can see the trail behind it. It's very transparent. There's a lot of white of the cardstock showing through behind it. So what I did here is I probably did thin it too much. So what I'm gonna do is add another couple of drops of paint to the mix here and see how it behaves now in comparison, and also in terms of its pigmentation behind it, right? So there you can see how the paint is flowing almost at the same rate as the one on our first thinned down version, but you can see how now there is a lot more of the color being retained behind it along the trail. So yeah, that first mix, I probably went a little too heavy on the water. It was probably more like 4-to-1 instead of 3-to-1 or 2-to-1. This curtain mix is probably almost 2-to-1. or even closer to 50-50. But again, to get an idea, you need to look at it, see how it flows. And the best thing to do, actually, even if it's just one bottle, get yourself one bottle of the quality model paints that you want to use, or airbrush paints, just to get an idea for yourself for how much you. That's what I did at the beginning. I only bought craft paint, and I watched a bunch of videos on on YouTube for how to thin your craft paint and all of that, and they all said the same thing. It just depends. It just depends on the brand. It depends on the color. It depends on if it's a metallic, if it's a gloss, this, that, or the other. So it really does depend on the paint, on the brand as well. And obviously, super cheap craft paint that you buy on the dollar store, I probably won't recommend that you use that, right? Because you're probably not, you're gonna if you start thinning that, you're going to definitely struggle to get a good color for it, or out of it, useful color, especially if we're talking like light colors like white, yellows, those type of colors. So you want something that's heavily pigmented to start with. Something like Liquitex. Liquitex is like an affordable but also high quality craft paint. Well, it's an artist paint, they call it, right? It's not necessarily something that is recommended, quote unquote, for you know something like model work, model painting. It's specifically made for you know using on canvases and all of that. But you can still use it for your projects. Um, One thing that I do recommend always is to use a clear on top to protect the paint. If you don't use a clear and you have your figures out on display, the over time dust and grime is going to accumulate. And if your paint isn't protected, and if your paints aren't uh, protected, or even if your paints are, if you globbed on the paint on your project and you didn't thin it out too much, it's going to look messy over time. Trust me, I've done it when I was starting out. I saw those results firsthand on some test figures that I used. The paint went on too thick. I didn't use a clear, and over time, the dust that accumulated on it, it was hard to take off, because it practically almost impregnated itself into the paint. So you definitely want to use protection on the paint, especially if you are using craft paint. So now we are going to dilute the Craft Smart with the ink. Let me just grab something to do the mix in. So I started off with 5 drops. This is 5 drops of the ink. I'm sorry. This is 5 drops of the ink. Okay. And I'm going to add 5 drops of the craft paint, and let's see how that. Actually, it's gonna be probably less because of the consistency of the. Let's see. 1, 2. Let's start off with 2 drops of the craft paint, and let's see how this mix turns out. Obviously, like I said, since it's not an exact color match, the end result of the color that we're getting will be different, right? If you want to retain the blue, the pure blue of the craft paint, you're going to need to find a blue ink that matches the blue of your craft paint, right? So let's see how this turns out. So yeah, you can see how the paint isn't really moving. But if you look at it in the bottle here, let me zoom out. If you look at it through the bottle, it has that consistency that you want. So this is probably, even though it's not flowing down the, here, you can see how it's running down. You can see it actually does have a good consistency. And it's retaining its color, sorry, and it's retaining its color throughout. Like I said, by adding in the ink, you're just adding more pigmentation to the color and thinning it out as you go. Let me see. I'm going to try one more time. Yeah, you can see it's not really flowing down. So let me just add, let's see. Let me just, no, it doesn't even matter how much. This is probably, this mix is probably good if you're planning on applying it on a, through a brush on method. You're gonna get excellent coverage and you're probably not gonna need multiple coats. So yeah, like I said, I didn't do this beforehand. The results are what the results are, and to say that I'm shocked with a few of these results is, to say the least. So again, drop one, craft paint, not thinned. Drop 2, Vallejo. Drop 3, Ronin, which is like Vallejo. Drop 4, Tamiya. Drop 5, Createx. Drop 6, Homie Art. Drop 7, the ink. Drop 8 and 9, craft paint thinned with distilled water. And then drops whatever, 11, 12, 13, that's craft paint thinned with ink. So there you go. So what did we learn? Well, like I said, what I've learned from all of these is you never know how paint is going to behave until you try it. But also, the 100% guarantee is craft paint can be used in your hobby. You just gotta have to find the right mix in terms of thinning it before it loses its color, and also for what type of use you want to use it. If you're gonna use it through an airbrush or through a regular hand brushing, it's all gonna be a trial and error. I started out testing out paints on a dollar store wannabe Gundam RX-7, something cheap. I primed it, and then I would test the color to see how it would work. If I thinned it too much, if I thinned it not enough, and all of that. And I've been using that Gundam cheap Gundam figure over and over and over for the past 6-7 years that I've started customizing action figures. So get yourself something really cheap that you want to work on for it to be your test dummy, and try the different mixes to see what results you are getting. But I also recommend, like I said, get yourself at least one bottle of good quality paint so that you can see how that paint behaves, and you can then understand and then try and mimic it like I tried with the craft paint and the ink. Right, so you can get a good consistency, not a lot, not too much loss of color, and also you know, you get yourself a good quality looking finish. So thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about the results, and also what type of paints that you use. Do you only stick to quality paints? Do you try craft paints? What brands do you use? And also, what kind of tricks do you use to thin paint? I only discovered the trick of thinning craft paint with ink just by a whim. I was thinning a red paint, I believe, and I had a bottle of red ink right near me. And I just thought, well, ink is almost like water. It's just got a different color. And I tried it. I liked the results. And I've been doing that for certain colors ever since. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. And I'll see you all in the next one.